Hey guys, Spartan here. This is a video about Black Reliquary. So I played that a few days ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. And the background footage you're going to be seeing is me playing the game, but this video isn't a normal playthrough or anything like this. This is the things that I noticed about the mod that I absolutely did not like. So, full disclosure aside, I didn't play too much of the mod. I played about 1 hour's worth, aka the tutorial mission, and I didn't even finish the second mission because I just did not want to continue, for reasons I'll get into. So, I'm gonna list off a few things that I found, not good about the mod, just in case someone's listening or anything like that, or to take into consideration if you want to play the mod. So, let's start with the obvious, the preparation round. So, if you've never heard of Black Reliquary, one of the main mechanics is that round 1 is, well, your heroes and the enemies have half accuracy and cannot crit on the first round. This is meant to encourage using buff skills, such as Revenge, or, I don't know, Crusader, Bulwark, or some garbage like that. It's basically, yeah, you use turn 1 to buff and then the fight continues as normal. So, what I do not like about this is it leads to basically a feel-bad situation if you're running a character who doesn't even have a buff. Granted, all the heroes from my knowledge start with all their skills, so you can just slot on a buff skill. But that still basically means that you are forcing, or being forced to take one of your 4 skills to be a move that you're going to use on just round 1. Now, the base game has some of these, like Bellow is a move that you use on round 1 and never use again, pretty much. But usually, round 1 is the most important for taking out a problematic enemy or something like that. And you can't exactly do that in this mod. For instance, let's take the Cove, for instance. Cove turn 1 against a bad comp is basically you try to Zerg down the Pelagic Grouper before the Pelagic Bulwark goes and guards him on his first turn. Pelagic Bulwark is very slow, so it's fairly easy to kill a Pelagic Grouper that would be guarded in the front ranks before he gets that guard off. In Black Reliquary, you can't really do that sort of thing because any accuracy you have would be, of course, halved, and you can't even crit. So basically, any enemy that desperately needs to die is going to get an extra turn. Now, Black Reliquary adds its own menagerie of creatures to replace the base ones. It's not just adds stuff, it removes the basic stuff. So you're not going to see enemies like that, or at least I haven't seen any yet. I'm going off of minimal playtime. But it just is a feel-bad situation. In the base game, if you run Jester, turn 1 you're using Battle Ballads, no question. Everybody uses Battle Ballad round 1 because it's the best time to use it, Jester is fast, and it goes before anyone else is going to attack. Now, units that have buffs, such as the Man-at-Arms Command in the base game, you may not consider actually running that, because one of the reasons is that, well, Man-at-Arms is fairly slow. Obviously, some of your units are going to attack beforehand, and you're not going to get a great deal of value. And you wouldn't use it in hallway fights. This is the main point. So, in hallway fights, it's basically stalling out something that should be fairly quick. Hallway fights in the base game, you fight 3 skeletons or something like that, or a few cultists. Doesn't usually last more than 2 or 3 rounds. But in Black Reliquary, some of the hallway fights can last upwards of 6 rounds. Just because of this stupid stalling round taking up one of them, and not being able to focus down a problematic enemy or something like that, and they can buff as well. Don't forget that this works both ways. This isn't just a negative for the enemy team because, oh, they have half accuracy and half, no crit, and they're just going to attack. No, they can buff too, and usually, from what I've seen, they do. So it's basically, oh hey, instead of actually making these buff skills good, we're just going to give you basically an extra turn of which you're going to need to use buff skills. Granted, there are some abilities that ignore this stipulation, but they're also buff or debuff skills. Bellow works that way. Yorp has an entirely different effect when taken on turn 1 that just buffs, debuffs enemy dodge or some garbage like that. But yeah, that's usually not what you want to be doing in Darkest Dungeon. And sure, you can still attack, but that just levers the game into more RNG-based skills. Like, do you seriously want to use an ability with, like, the Hellion to debuff the enemy? Or would you rather hit them for damage, which is what the Hellion's supposed to do as a damage dealer? Like, ugh, it just feels really bad when you're playing it. Next up on my list of things I despise is disease. Everyone knows I hate disease. Everyone knows a lot of people hate disease in the base game. And, this mod didn't actually fix that or anything like that. It, in fact, made it worse from what I've seen. So, this is anecdotal evidence, but in one of the fights, or well, before one of the fights, I popped an item that granted me, like, extra disease resist. And then immediately in a fight, my man-at-arms got hit with a disease. So, yeah. And that was the tutorial mission, I'd like to point out. So, usually the enemies that give disease are either located in one specific location, or are locked behind difficulty, like... So, in case you didn't know, after a mission your heroes can get diseases, yeah, obviously, but you cannot get those diseases until you are at least level 3 with that hero. This is a balancing mechanic to make sure you don't have to waste too much of your money on disease treatment in the early game. This is good game design. And, like, sure, there's disease in the Warrens or the Cove, but you shouldn't have them in the fucking tutorial. Like, who puts an enemy that can disease in the tutorial? That is not good. That is not good game design. Take it out, remove it, delete it. Nobody wants to deal with disease. Also, this game introduces symptoms, which, honestly, I haven't seen much, but from the experience of what had happened for me, is that symptoms turn to diseases at the end of the mission. This is supposedly going to be, like, used as a, oh hey, this is, you know, somewhat bad here, but it will only get really bad at the end of the mission so that it won't actually, like, destroy you. From what I've seen, though, the symptoms are also really bad. I'm going to pull up a clip of something that happened in Mission 2. Of which I touched a soup pot with my Crusader, and 3 of my characters got a symptom that gave them -5 accuracy. That is some bullshit right there. Especially considering that this is the early game, and you're supposed to be touching things just to see, okay, is this good interaction? Is this bad interaction? And I know a lot of people are going to say, you know, you have to use the correct items for the correct curios. This is basic Darkest Dungeon game design. Yeah. But you're going to need to start off by touching them normally, otherwise, like, you're going to have bad reactions to everything. I'm going to take the occult scrawlings in the Warrens as an example for this. So, the only interaction you have with that by using a curio is Holy Water, and that's a debuff. That is, like, the exception. But if you only used Holy Water or you only used items, then you'd see that's the only interaction. I'll never touch this. No, you're going to need to touch it normally in case it's got something good, because the scrollings also can give you positive or negative quirks, and also add, like, you know, the bloody occultist extra stress heal, same with Antiquarian and Plague Doctor, but that's a district thing. So, yeah, being punished with a party-wide disease is something that should not exist in curio form, especially when, like, sure, 5 accuracy, it doesn't seem that bad on paper, but at level 1, and when you realize that that's basically the strength of base game Battle Ballad, that's just insane that you can get that from one curio. I'm incredibly salty over that. Next up, the enemy names. This is like a cultural thing most likely, so feel free to disregard this, but I do not get any, like, connection to these enemies via names. To me, it seems like a whole bunch of random gibberish strewn together. Like, there are plenty of iconic enemies in the game. Like, you see, oh yeah, Bone Courtier. Everyone remembers him by name, or calls him, like, Bone Royalty, because that's what he's basically called in the files. The Ghoul, the Flesh Eater, everyone knows these things by name. As soon as you say their names, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that dude, he's annoying, or he's cool. But when you hear, like, Kivrak Kalzinioth, like, what do you think of with that? It wasn't actually an enemy's name, but it essentially could be, and you wouldn't even know what it would do based on that. Like, you see some of the enemies in this mod and you're like, what the hell did they do? Like, take a look at them, in the background. Yeah, do you have any idea what any of these creatures would do at a glance? No, you wouldn't. they're very weird. Like, the art isn't bad, it's just that the names need to be a bit better to be more indicative of what they actually do. Like, what do I need to focus? Do I focus the pot that has smoke coming out of it, or do I focus the skeleton with the giant hands that's, like, also a metal being? I don't know. Next up on my list, the mod creator doubles all damage and health numbers for your heroes. So, this may seem weird, but this actually makes the game a lot more inconsistent. In the words of the two best friends when playing Darkest Dungeon on their channel, one of them said, "Would you rather these numbers have 2 zeros on them to make it seem like your attacks are more impactful?" Which says a lot about the game when you consider that adding, like, extra numbers to things just doesn't really matter. Like, it is the least impactful thing, in theory, but in relativity, it's basically just adding more randomness to the game. Like, if you can do 2 to 4 damage, there's only like 4 outcomes. There's 2, 3, 4, and crit for 6. If you do like 20 to 40, there's like, how many outcomes is that? Like 20 outcomes or something like that? It's some large number like that. So just adds a whole bunch of more possibilities of in-betweens and junk like that. It's not actually changing much, it's just putting things more to chance. So yeah, that is not particularly a good change. It is a very minor one at least though, so you can feel free to like ignore this point if you want to. Next up, fucking every enemy has protection. Why? Why give every enemy in the game protection? Like, this is not something that exists. Like, in the base game, there's maybe 5 or so enemies that have small amounts of protection that don't fit into like a role. Like, sure, Bone Bulwark, Pelagic Guardian, stuff like that obviously is going to have protection. Then you have some of the things like, I don't know, there's like farmstead enemies that have a bit of protection. There's the Brigand Cutthroats, they have a little bit of protection. But this is obviously done to like make characters like, oh yeah, this ignores protection, so it's basically extra damage. If you wanted skills to do extra damage, why didn't you just add a fucking plus damage modifier to them if every enemy is going to have protection? This is making things needlessly complex and just nerfing any character that has actual damage numbers. Probably the final thing I'm going to go over for at least now, and from what I've seen of the game, is that they removed the resistance pop-up. So, the resistance pop-up everyone knows is like, oh hey, yeah, I resisted a bleed, or a blight, or a disease, or something like that. That does not exist in Black Reliquary for some reason. I do not understand why. It is valuable information to have. Maybe the mod developer thinks, oh, nobody wants to see resist pop up like a million times per battle, but it is very important. Let's take this instance for something. Now, I don't know what exactly this was meant to be. Something negative happened, and nothing happened. I go and check my Crusader, and there's just nothing here, nothing new or anything like that. So, obviously having like a resist pop-up would be incredibly useful to know. Maybe that's a disease, maybe that's a bleed, a blight, I don't even know at this point, because I have no information, because the game decides, let's remove resist so that the player doesn't actually know what's going on. He doesn't know Pepe Love. In combat at least it's a little more acceptable, considering that you can check the skills of the enemies to see what effects they have. But it's still really something that didn't need to be removed from the game. Like, it exists for a reason, man. It's existed since the start of the game in early access. Like, everyone needs to see these things go on. At least you could maybe put an option in to turn it off or something like that, but yeah. There is pretty much no reason to actually turn it off. I mean, if people wanted to speed up the game, they'd use a speed up mod or something like that. But yeah, that's pretty much all the problems I have so far with Black Reliquary. I don't even know if I'm going to play it anymore because it just damages the soul. There were a few things I really did like though, most notably I saw some of the trinket changes and they were pretty damn interesting to me. Like, I saw Sacrificial Cauldron was like a buffs healing skills on melee hit or something like that, and then removes all those buffs once you use a heal. So it's basically like building up a more powerful heal. That was pretty good. I liked the concept of that. But, yeah, mostly bitterness from me. So, I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least learned something from my ramblings. I'll see you guys in the next video that I make, which I don't know what it is. But yep, goodbye.